introduce Michael Moradzadeh. Michael, we're going to do this a little differently. Rather than a presentation, Michael and I are going to have a bit of a conversation about his firm. And I found his firm. I had learned about his firm, and I found it really interesting. I've been working with law firms for about 30 years, and Michael has taken an approach that is very entrepreneurial, which fits in very well with what 1BW is doing. And so I thought maybe, Michael, maybe you could talk a little bit about your firm, all right, Rimon Law, and what is this distribution hybrid model that you're boasting as being, that this is, not used so much, but that this is something kind of new to the market, kind of.
Sure. I don't know if we're boasting, but
I didn't mean to.
Yes. No, but I understand. We are, to put it very, I suppose, simply, we are a law firm that was designed 13 and a half, almost 14 years ago now, to take advantage of technological innovations that, like, we're using right now, video conferencing, cloud computing, to streamline the costs of a traditional law firm, and therefore allow our attorneys to have more flexibility with their clients. Now, more specifically, that means that we are a semi-virtual or hybrid law firm, which means most of our attorneys are working remotely. This has become quite normal due to COVID, but we were ahead of the game, and we built the firm, specifically designed it for that purpose. So our attorneys have mostly been working remotely since the beginning. We do have, what makes us a hybrid firm is that we do have offices. We actually found 3 years into being a virtual law firm, purely virtual law firm, that having offices for conference rooms, for secure storage of files, for specific types of meetings was actually really helpful. But that you didn't need to have the traditional office that everybody goes into every day, and instead you could leverage what we've now all experienced during COVID. So this gives us a huge advantage in recruiting great talent for the last 13 years, because a lot of attorneys wanted to have that flexibility. And then when COVID started, we had the advantage of already being on all these systems when everybody else was trying to figure it out. Right. And now we have the advantage of having done this from enough years that we kind of know where things are headed post-COVID, which, as I said, is the hybrid model, which we're now seeing a lot of other companies are thinking is probably the future for them as well.
Right. So when you started this, you were an attorney at Ropes and Gray.
That's right.
And this was, again, how many years ago? About 13 years ago, you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. Almost, right. 13 and a half years.
It's a great firm. You said it's a great firm, but what gave you what was the aha moment for you to actually step out and start a firm like this?
Yeah, so Ropes was absolutely an excellent firm. For those who don't know Ropes, it's what's referred to as a white shoe law firm. It's been around since, I think, before the Civil War. It does really high-end law. I had the privilege of learning under a lot of the partners there. That's where I started practicing law, did private equity transactions, types of deals you would see in the Wall Street Journal, all that good stuff. It's highly academic, super smart lawyers, great clients, all those things that I loved. However, my background before going to law school was in tech. I grew up here in Silicon Valley. I worked for tech companies. Most of my friends, I went to UC Berkeley, so most of my friends were engineers who went on and worked for tech companies. So I saw that the traditional law firm model was not leveraging technology as much as I thought they could. And so even firms as great as Ropes and Gray, I felt were built on old assumptions. Fancy office space that you go into and barely use, expecting attorneys to just work together because you're in the same office, theoretically. But in reality, that wasn't happening. So already at that time, I was working on deals doing internet, like I said, private equity and technology. I was working with colleagues, and I was in San Francisco working with colleagues in Boston or New York, clients in London or Morocco. So it's not like I was sitting in a room with them anyway. And so it felt kind of, antiquated to go into the office, again, a very fancy office that costs a lot of money, just to be on the phone and not use video conferencing or cloud computing. So the aha moment came when I was chatting with one of my colleagues, Yakov Silberman, who had moved from the Boston office to the San Francisco office. And his phone number stayed the same. His email address stayed the same. His clients and colleagues, if he didn't tell him, wouldn't even really have noticed he had moved. So he and I were working late one night. We had dinner and we were thinking about, what would be the ideal law firm model if it was built from scratch today being 13 years ago, as opposed to the law firm that had evolved over 150 or 200 years. And so you could say that was the aha moment. That's when we started thinking about actually writing on a napkin, thinking about what that law firm would look like. As I alluded to a moment ago, we did go, I would say, a little too far. We decided go purely virtual at that time. But then after 3 years, we realized that the hybrid approach is actually better. You want to have offices for those attorneys who want to go in, for the practice areas like trust and estates where the clients need to come in. You want to have conference rooms for large M&A, billion-dollar deals or bet the company litigation. For IP litigation, you might have hardware you need to store somewhere, but you don't need the attorneys. You don't need to force them to come in every day when they don't want to, right? So yeah, I would say it was one aha moment that has continued to evolve. The firm is still improving on itself day by day. So there are a series of aha moments since then, but that would have been the start of it.
Yeah. How many attorneys do you have now, partners?
161.
Okay, wow. So you when you started, how long before you started to really bring on? Because I imagine in the beginning, the hardest thing is to get that top talent to move, right? The risk of
Yes.
moving somewhere new, right? That now has to be lessening. But
Yes.
how did that scaling up of the company work, firm work?
Absolutely. That was very hard. The first 3 years were very, very difficult because our rule number one was to be a top tier, high quality law firm. We didn't want to sacrifice that at all. So bringing in only attorneys that were at the absolute, top level of our profession, especially since we were in a distributed model. We took extra care to make sure we're bringing attorneys who don't need supervision, attorneys who have their own client base, and attorneys who want to work with other people. We didn't want to have silos. We didn't want to become the Uber of law firms. So we've always been very, very picky. And that's very hard at the beginning, when you don't really have anybody. So it took time. It took quite a bit of time and effort. But we were able to find the right people who put their faith in us and joined us. And some of them are still with us. Carl Scher comes to mind. He's been with us since the beginning. And it absolutely built on itself. So we started with attorneys that didn't need as much, let's say, the overhead support or other specialists. So we started with corporate lawyers. Corporate lawyers a little bit easier to start with, particularly for tech companies. Then we grew from that to all the practice areas that get work from corporate lawyers. So IP or litigation or trust and estates or tax or real estate, and that built on itself and continues to build on itself. And then in the last 3 years, we've been growing internationally. So you're absolutely right, Jeff. It's become a lot easier as we've grown. The network effect makes it so that as we grow, it's a lot easier to expand.
And I also noticed that on your website, the partners, they post where they came from, right? So
Yes.
so you get to see that, right? Where typically most other partners or other websites I go to, they're there. You don't know how long they've been there. Many of them have started their career, became partners there, so
Yes.
they probably don't have a lot. But even if people move, you don't really see where they came from. Where it's sort of like a badge for you, almost to say, hey, look, we just hired this top, this partner from this top firm. It actually works for you the way you guys have set up.
Absolutely. We see the other elite firms as similar to the universities our lawyers came from. They're alumni from these law firms. They might have been associates there. Almost all of them were partners at these elite firms before joining us. So we don't see them as necessarily just our competition. Of course, we do compete with those firms as well, but we see that as a valuable experience they're bringing to the table. And not just from the perspective of practicing law, by the way, also from the perspective of, how to serve clients. That's of course related to practicing law, but they've learned about the best practices of how the law firm itself is structured. So when they come to us, they come with great ideas, meaning our attorneys come from all these great law firms, but a diverse group of law firms, over 50, 60 elite firms that our attorneys were partners in, or some of them were actually in the, the executive committees or the boards of these firms. So they've brought the great ideas that they've learned from those firms. They've also brought, the experiences that were not so great that we learned from. And that's how, again, we are constantly tinkering with the firm and learning, because as our attorneys come in with their experiences, it allows us to leverage that diverse experience and grow from there.
So when a partner signs up with you, or you hire whomever it is, maybe even a group from, I don't know, have you hired, multiple people from the same firm, or are you normally one? I mean, you also don't want to be viewed as going into a firm and taking a department from them. I don't think that's the approach. But how do you kind of look at that?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right on both fronts. So most of our attorneys have joined us one at a time. It's been organic growth because we're so choosy and making sure that every attorney who joins us, and we're very careful with our vetting. It's usually one attorney at a time, maybe a partner with an associate or two associates that are coming with them, but usually it's not a group. However, especially now that we're growing bigger, there have been groups that have joined us where it made sense because they work very nicely together as a group. Everybody in the group is performing at the highest level, and they, for whatever reason, want to stay together as a group, but they don't want to be at that firm anymore. So yes, we have done that now with two groups with more than 4 partners, and then a couple others that were 2 partners at a time.
Right. So there are different kinds of, you look at some partners are considered like rainmakers, right? They've got a lot of clients, and you have some partners that maybe don't go out and get quite as much, but they're really great at what they do, right? They're great technical lawyers. And how do you get, when you bring those people in, and you bring in, let's say, someone who doesn't have a gigantic book of business but is very highly valued, how do you get them work? How do they work within the group, within the team, within the Rimon family?
So it's a very good question. I think this touches upon a bigger question about how do the attorneys work together at all, right? Or how do they think about each other at all, whether they have a big book of business or not? Because if they have a big book of business, first of all, they still want to work with other people, but also someone has to service that book of business, right? So it goes in both directions. And so that's where we spend most of our time and effort as management and in building this firm, is how to actually have the attorneys work together more than they do at a traditional firm, actually, not just as much, but more. So we do a lot of things. And nowadays, because of COVID, it's a lot easier for me to describe because people have been doing some of these things anyway. But we have 2 monthly meetings, video calls that all our attorneys are invited to. And we make those meetings as collaborative as possible. We try to have, first of all, any new attorney presents so that everybody in the firm gets to know them as quickly as possible. We try to ask other attorneys that haven't spoken in a while to talk about what they're working on. We try to make it as, CLEs that have to do with legal updates, things that are collaborative, so people have an opportunity to see each other and think about each other. We have Microsoft Teams channels for different practice areas and different interests. It could be intellectual property litigation, or it could be remote lawyers in New York, or it could be people who like cats, right? So it just creates lots of opportunities, again, to socialize virtually, but also to actually talk about legal opportunities. We have 3 firm-wide retreats a year. That might actually, as we're growing internationally, maybe we'll even turn that into 4. And those are, hands-on, they're physical retreats. We're actually getting together and doing the things that you can't do virtually, getting drinks, socializing, but also breaking into small groups and talking about specific client needs and brainstorming and all that stuff. So we really get to know each other. And then on top of that, we do have hubs, right? So even though our firm is distributed, we have lawyers in certain locations, right? That either maybe we have an office there, like in Silicon Valley, Or say in New York, where we don't even have a physical office yet, we would get together for happy hours or for lunches or for summer picnics or for holiday parties or these other things. So there are lots of opportunities where we get to know each other on top of the more formal meetings that I've laid out. So the end result of all of this is that our attorneys actually work together very closely. What we call the cross collaboration rate, meaning the percentage of work done by one partner for another partner's client, is actually 49% in 2020, which is the most recent year we have this data for. 49% of the work done at the firm was done by one attorney servicing another attorney's clients. And our biggest client doesn't even account for 4% of our revenue. So when you do the math, it means that the work is actually going very much like a web in every direction. It's not top down, one rainmaker keeping a bunch of service lawyers busy. Even actually our lawyer who brings in the most business doesn't even account for 6% of our business. So it really is pretty evenly distributed, and it's going across practice areas, across geographies. The attorneys are working very well together. And as I said earlier, almost all of our attorneys were partners at elite firms before they joined us. And they've told us that they actually do a lot more. They've gotten to know their colleagues more here than they did at their traditional firms. And the reason for that is because we actually go out of our way, right? As I said earlier, my experience at Ropes and Gray, but you could look at most firms, the assumption is you're all in an office together, so you get to know each other. That doesn't really happen. And for us, because we are distributed, we've gone out of our way to make sure that the attorneys get to know each other and do all these activities I've been talking about. And we make it as easy as possible for them to get to know each other. And by the way, I didn't even talk about new attorneys. So when new attorneys are interviewing with us, when we're vetting them, when they join, we have a welcome committee. We make sure they know at least 8 lawyers as soon as they join. So there's lots of opportunities to interact. And that, again, is very important to us. That is, to me, the real ultimate purpose of a law firm is to bring lawyers together as a team so they can serve their clients well. So we don't take that lightly.
Yeah. And so you're looking to continue to expand, right, into different countries and all that. I imagine that as someone that's running the business there, not just doing the legal work, that you still have challenges ahead of you as your firm grows to continue to bring that, right? Do you have a limit in a sense of how much you want to grow in terms of the size and where, or are you just looking, as long as it continues to work, just keep growing it?
The latter. So yes, I mean, we're constantly evaluating everything, because rule number one, again, is quality, right? We're not looking to grow for growth's sake. Like I said, we're not looking to be the Uber of law where lawyers just come and join and kind of do their own thing. So every lawyer that joins, we need to make sure not only that they are at the highest caliber, but that the collegiality, all these things we've been talking about, the sense of community, the flexibility that our firm offers. We don't want to create any bureaucracy. We don't have hierarchy among our partners. We don't want to have to create that. So if we find that as we grow, we see that there's going to be any kinds of issues with that, or if our cross collaboration rate starts to go down, our attorneys start to feel unhappy, or we feel like the quality or the bureaucracy might have to come in there, then we will slow down growth or take a pause and reevaluate. So far, thank goodness, we've seen that the opposite is true. As we've grown, the opportunities for cross collaboration have grown. The model is built to scale, right? So as we get bigger, just more opportunities for attorneys to get to know each other and cross collaborate in different ways. We continue to come up with new ideas to work together that actually you can do at a bigger size to scale. That's harder to do at a smaller size. So far that has not been an issue. If you asked me, 10 years ago, I might have said that. Actually, I think I did say in some interviews that I think 70, 80 might be a time when we will evaluate whether this model continues to allow for all the good things that it was built for. Now that we're almost twice that size, I can safely say that it has not been an issue. So we'll see. We're going to keep going and constantly evaluating.
Okay. Well, I said in the beginning, I misused the word boast because I'm the one that really would be boasting about, my conversations with you and what I've seen you do. You're not the type to do that, I know. But I think you've done great. I think you've done great work. The feedback I've gotten from friends of mine that know you have been great. I wish you a lot of luck with this. And I'm sure there are things that that other law firms, larger law firms, are going to learn from not just you, but other companies that are making these kind of changes. I'm sure they're not standing still just because they're a big law firm. They're going to be making changes like this as well. So, but we'll see how it changes, how the field of law is going to change. But I really appreciate your time today, Michael. It was nice talking to you.
Thank you, Jeff. This has been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
Ours.